Terrarian in the Dungeon, Chapter 43, Fan Fiction by Azazyel. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel for listening and patreon.com/Azazyel to read all of his stories. Jake Barris was a perfect example of committing blasphemy, yet it was useful blasphemy at the same time. Ryuu pondered as she duly watched the Apollo Familia get splattered across the ground via the remote viewing system that Hermes was streaming to all the clubs, bars, and places where people gathered to watch war games. On one hand, Ryuu understood the sheer value of having high-quality Excelia on demand, yet Ryuu couldn't, for the life of her, forget the army of white-cloaked absolutely mind-broke individuals that made up Evelis. And what better tool to destroy Ryuu and even uncap the dungeon than having an army of monster Rexes summoned throughout Ryuu? Jake is not even a threat to Ryuu. No, with his summoned monster Rexes, he is a legitimate threat to the world itself, as that desert Scrooge could begin breaking down the Tower of Babel. She muttered under her breath so quietly that not even Anya or Chloe, her co-workers, could hear, as a flicker of murderous intent rose up in her heart. But then Jake swung back in after the Apollo captain was eaten and killed the desert Scrooge, and although seeing his heroic action did blow out the murderous thought she had. In the end, she honestly considered hunting down Jake to save him from the torture that Evelis would use to break his mind, even with their delusional evil gods no doubt being willing to dirty their hands to break in such a valuable mortal. Then, as Jake headbutted the Apollo onto the ground and accepted the Fool's War Game challenge, Ryuu grinned. It wasn't a smile of triumph or even happiness that someone Seer had mentioned in friendly terms before. No, it was a smile of utter satisfaction. Because with Apollo's Familia being decimated in a monster Rex but still being highly wealthy, it was obvious that Apollo was going to reach into the dregs of society to even the odds against the monster that was Jake, with his no-chant magic and being capable of dropping a monster Rex on his opponents. And who better to respond to such a call to action than the utter scum of society like assassins and Evelis? Ryuu worked and all but lived solely at the premier bar for adventurers. Literally every rumor that passed through Ryuu ended up here at some point in the hostess of fertility. Rumors of people in white cloaks, abducting people in the depths of the Deadless district had been growing as of late, and Ryuu, even though she had hung up her mantle. Sometimes at night, she wondered if the Gale should make a return and make the streets of Ryuu run red with the blood of sinners again. Mamma mia, I am taking a week off. I have paid my dues for the month, and I need to take care of some things. Ryuu said as she watched the broadcast, as Jake led that weird flying eye monster around the forest that got utterly wrecked by the stone pillar-sized beams of magic the eye would shoot at him, to say nothing of the obviously cursed flames that melted off the flesh of any Loki member who got too close to it. Yes, such a monster could cause terrible damage to Ryuu, and thus, of course, Evelis will not be able to hold back its desire to make a move on Jake. He is literally the perfect bait for the rats. Well, business is probably going to temper down with all the damn customers getting sloshed watching the event tonight. But either way, you've got till that Bratz War Game comes up, as it's going to be all hands on deck, you understand? Mia said pointedly, and Ryuu reflexively nodded, shuddering under the heavy gaze of Mia Grande. She had seen the fates of Chloe and Lunwar when they decided to skip work for a couple of days, and Mia had to hunt them down. She didn't want to be laid up in bed after Mia beat her to the precise point that she would need to rest for however long she had skipped out on work. Yes, Mama, she said, and then hurried into the back so she could finish her shift of work. Obviously, following Jake Barris was going to be the most trying thing in her years, as even Loki and Freya's hounds couldn't follow the young man half the time due to how he teleported around and threw off any trace. Like, literally, he is rumored to have the ability to teleport between toilets only. One time he said he had to go to the bathroom, and with his space ability he left a toilet behind as he teleported. Now everyone thinks Jake has the ability to teleport between all the toilets of Ryuu. Ryuu huffed as she washed some dishes. Obviously, such a thing was a false rumor. What's next? Jake could only teleport to the last place he slept with a woman. Ha! Ryuu actually snorted at the thought, making Seer, who snuck up behind her, loudly squeak in surprise instead. Oh, Seer, it's just you. Is the broadcast over now? Ryuu asked nonchalantly while hiding the smug little smile she had at actually scaring her troublesome savior under her elfish, poised expression. Yup. It was so adorable. Apparently, Ace Wallenstein has a crush or something on Jake, as she was making grabby hands and trying to beg for Jake's magical sword that he got from killing that weird-eye monster Rex. Seer exclaimed gleefully, obviously taking great joy in the rumors that were going to fill the bar tonight. But Ryuu frowned. Why in the world would the Sword Princess follow Jake around? And she most certainly doesn't like or have a crush on him, as she is well known for having less emotional intelligence than the average tree stump. Ryuu thought as she pondered how this was going to affect her stock shadowing of Jake to see how Evelyn would go after him. Ace Wallenstein pining after a boy. That would be the day, I suppose. Ryuu responded dryly, giving Seer the validation she needed, otherwise she would needle Ryuu for the entire night. No, she would actually go into her room after lights out and have a discussion on why her theory or rumor had to be correct, and the more Ryuu defended her point, the more outlandish the point Seer would guess to bring validation to her claims, until Ryuu would give up and accept the rumor or theory as an ironclad fact, so silver-haired witch would leave her be. I know, right? I mean, Ace is obviously adorable and whatnot. But she is a broken doll and Jake doesn't need that in his life, right Ryuu? Seer said energetically at first, but spoke almost mechanically at the end in a voice that had Ryuu's senses tingle as she threw her coworker a side eye as she helped dry off the dishes beside the elf. Seer's iron-silver eyes dully stared ahead as she monotonously dried off the dishes, and then she spoke softly. It's just kind of pitiful, you know. How she constantly reaches for him, wanting his things, only caring for him as a person that can make her strong. But I can't help but wonder how far she will push to get the things she desires to grow stronger. Seer continued to speak, and now Ryuu was actually a bit concerned, as although she knew Seer was massive, and even that was an understatement. But Seer was a massive meddler in the lives of anyone tangible related to her. Jake could sort of fit in that category, as she had seen them talk a couple times, as Seer had just happened to meet the young man on the roads of Rio in quick exchanges as Seer dragged her to different parts of the city to get groceries from different stores. So maybe they were closer friends than she knew. Ryuu thought as she coughed to get Seer out of her mental mess. Jake is a smart human, isn't he? Then trust in him to know how to handle the sword princess. It's not like she is going to seduce him or something. Ryuu said, and Seer nodded, taking a deep breath. Yes, of course. Jake doesn't even seem to be aiming for a life partner anyway. Always messing around with demi-humans and whatnot. Seer muttered under her breath at the end at a level that Ryuu only thought Seer was grumbling about Jake not being romantically interested in anyone. Maybe you should be more proactive then. Ryuu spoke to get Seer out of her head. I mean, this war game business is probably going to happen in either a few days or, more likely, get pushed back to this next weekend so everyone can watch. In the meantime, why don't you catch Jake on his way to the dungeon and ask him out on a date or something? I mean, you already have a whole book on where you want to take Jake or have him take you. Ryuu said with a hint of red coming to her cheek. Ryuu was a chaste elf, and seeing Seer's sordid diary filled with filth had made her feel some very unselfish desires. Ryuu. You can't just read a lonely maiden's diary. Seer screamed with embarrassment as her face went atomic red, and Ryuu only chuckled as she looked back down to her dishes while Seer pathetically asked what she had read, and Ryuu only hemmed and hawed, making subtle points that only drew more anguish from Seer.